They called it the City of Riches, a name whispered on the wind, carried on the desperate dreams of men from across the globe. They came to the heart of the Australian outback chasing a promise, the promise of gold, a glittering, seductive promise that could build a city from dust and turn paupers into kings overnight, and for a time it did. This was Corvus Creek, a city born of sweat, grit, and shimmering yellow metal pulled from the earth's veins. Streets that were once just dirt tracks became bustling avenues, lined with grand hotels and rowdy saloons. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer was the town's heartbeat, and the roar of the stamp mill was its triumphant song. Every man had a story of a lucky strike, a massive nugget, a future secured. The gold was endless. The prosperity, they believed, was eternal. But some things that glitter are not gold, and some fortunes are built not on luck but on a foundation of darkness. The story of Corvus Creek's fall from grace begins not with a bang, but with a whisper, a secret shared between two men in the deep, suffocating dark of the oldest mine shaft. One was Thomas Riley, a prospector with calloused hands and honest eyes, a man who had toiled for years with little to show for it. The other was Silas Blackwood, a man whose hands were clean, but whose ambition was blacker than the cold, dark tunnels they stood in. One fateful afternoon, the glint that Thomas had dreamed of finally appeared. It wasn't just a vein. It was the source, the mother lode, a cavern of quartz threaded with thick, impossibly pure ribbons of gold. It was a discovery that would not just make him a king, but an emperor. Overwhelmed, he made his first and last mistake. He told Silas Blackwood, "What happened next in that suffocating darkness is a secret the earth still keeps." Thomas Riley was never seen again. The official story was a tragic accident, a cave-in, a man lost to the unforgiving earth he so desperately tried to conquer. Silas Blackwood, however, emerged from the dust not as a mourner, but as the town's new savior. He discovered the motherlode himself, claimed it, and flooded Corvus Creek with a wave of wealth it had never seen before. He was hailed as a hero, a visionary. The town boomed. The parties grew louder, the buildings taller, but the town's new heartbeat sounded different. It was frantic, hollow. That's when the whispers started. At first, it was just the wind whistling through the new mine shafts, they said. But miners working the deep seams, the very seams of Silas's great discovery, would hear it. A faint, pleading voice on the edge of hearing. Sometimes they'd hear the distant, rhythmic tap, 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 of a pickaxe from a section of the mine that had been sealed off for months, the section where Thomas Riley had disappeared. Tools would go missing, only to reappear in impossible places. Lanterns would extinguish on their own in the deepest tunnels, plunging men into absolute, terrifying blackness. Shadows seemed to stretch and move on their own in the flickering light. Men would come up from their shifts pale and shaking, speaking of a cold spot, a sudden feeling of profound sadness, or the chilling sensation of a hand on their shoulder when no one was there. Silas Blackwood laughed it all off. Superstition, he called it. The ramblings of tired, drunken miners. He built a grand mansion on the hill overlooking the town, a monument to his success, its windows like vacant eyes watching over the empire he had stolen. But even he could not escape the growing dread. He began to suffer from terrible nightmares. He'd wake in a cold sweat, swearing he heard a voice whispering a single word over and over. Betrayer. The curse, if that's what it was, did not remain underground. It seeped into the very foundations of Corvus Creek. Greed turned to paranoia. Neighbors who had been friends for years now eyed each other with suspicion. Fights broke out in the saloons over imagined slights. Claims were stolen. Men were found dead in dark alleyways, their pockets empty. The golden prosperity had become a sickness, a fever that was driving the whole town mad. The gold from the mother lode started to dwindle. The impossibly rich vein began to run dry far sooner than anyone expected. As the money tightened, the town's true character was revealed. The glittering facade cracked and crumbled. Families packed up their belongings and left in the dead of night, fleeing the bad luck and the oppressive atmosphere that now hung over the valley like a shroud. The final blow came not from a ghost, but from the earth itself. A series of violent tremors shook the valley. The main shaft of Blackwood's mine, the source of all the town's wealth and all its misery, collapsed in a deafening roar of splintering timber and falling rock, burying the last of the cursed gold and several miners forever. It was the town's death rattle. Within a year, Corvus Creek was empty. A skeleton of a city, left to be scoured by the wind and baked by the unforgiving sun. Silas Blackwood's grand mansion was one of the last places to be abandoned. They say he refused to leave, barricading himself inside, a prisoner of his own stolen wealth. The last people to see him described a broken man, talking to shadows, haunted by the ghost of a man he had wronged and a fortune that had brought him nothing but ruin. He was found in his study, surrounded by gold bars that were now worthless, a look of pure terror frozen on his face. Music returns to the initial melancholic ambient theme. Today, all that remains are the ghosts. The ghosts of buildings, their wooden bones groaning in the wind. The ghosts of forgotten dreams. And if you stand very still and listen, really listen, you might hear something else. It's not just the wind. It's a whisper carried from the sealed-off depths of the earth. A cautionary tale of greed, of betrayal, and of a treasure that cost everyone everything. They came for the gold, but they found only tragedy. And they left behind a silence so profound, it screams the secrets of what happened.